Leading Holistically, an interview with Dr. Travis Hearne. Join us for an insightful interview with Dr. Travis Hearne, who shares his profound expertise on the importance of holistic health in leadership. Stemming from his new book, Through the Storm, we explore how emotional healing plays a crucial role in solid leadership. Dr. Hearne emphasizes that we cannot escape life's storms, but our approach to them defines our resilience and success. Inspired by the buffalo, which faces storms head on, his book underscores the principle that the only way out is through, a strategy that ultimately leads to less time in life's storms. Welcome to the Wellness Driven Life Show, where you're about to go on a wellness driven ride. Let me share a little bit about the incredible guests that we have with us today. Dr. Travis Hearne, founder and CEO of Titanium Consulting Group, TCG, is a Marine Corps combat veteran and international best-selling author. He holds a doctorate in organizational change and leadership from USC and a master's in Homeland Security from Penn State. With extensive experience in intelligence analysis and cybersecurity, he now leads TCG and an international cybersecurity sales team, focusing on empowering leaders globally through his diverse background. I am so pleased to help welcome to our stage Dr. Travis Hearne. Welcome.
Hey, April, thank you very much. I'm taking you on the road with me for these intros. That was fantastic. I appreciate it. So I'm really excited to be here. This is amazing.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm excited to talk about this topic, your book, all of the concepts. You have extensive background. You have an immense amount of passion. So thank you so much for being on the Wellness Driven Life Show today. Let's get started by sharing a little bit more about you so the audience can get to know you more.
Yeah. So my leadership love goes back to, so I joined the Marine Corps in 2006. And from 2006 to 2016, I was in Iraq from 2008, 2009, Afghanistan in 2010. And that's when I really felt this really passion and this drive for figuring out how leaders tick. And, you know, when you're in situations like Iraq and Afghanistan, leadership has the highest of stakes. Leadership can truly save lives, and leadership can truly cost lives. So that was when this stirring of helping to develop amazing leaders across the globe really kind of sparked in me. So after the Marine Corps, I joined the intelligence community. I worked to counter everything from counterterrorism to counter narcotics to counter cyber, to doing all these things. And then I started Titanium Consulting Group back in 2018 after I finished up my doctorate. Because there is something to be said about good leaders, and there's something to be said about helping leaders find their true selves, their holistically healthy self. I talk about that a lot in the book. To me, leaders need to be holistically healthy. So that was when I launched this. Now we have consultants and coaches that dive in with executives, with leadership teams, with large companies, with entrepreneurs, with startups, and we help leaders pull out the holistically healthy potential that they have within themselves.
Well, I can relate just a tiny little bit in the sense of going through very difficult things and learning the in-depthness of what leadership really takes. Now, when we talk about holistic leadership, what does that mean to you?
Man, so holistic leadership, I define holistic leadership through 4 pillars. So we have mental health, emotional health, physical health, and business health. So when we combine those 4 pillars, that makes a holistically healthy leader. So what that means is that a holistically healthy leader is in any level of state of each of those pillars. They may be incredibly emotionally healthy, but their physical health is failing. They may be, their business may be doing well, but their physical health is failing. So when we talk about holistically healthy leadership, and what we do with leadership teams and executives is we balance those things out. In order to be a successful, highly driven, highly functional leader, you have to be healthy in those ways in order to scale businesses, in order to grow people, in order to really do anything in the business world or in the leadership world. So that's the definition of holistically healthy. It's the whole person. We identify spiritual health. Like I love the intro, intellectual health. It all just fits into this place of we need to promote holistically healthy leaders. And that doesn't just mean business wise. It doesn't just mean financial bottom line. It means the whole person and the whole team.
And we so often, just as human beings, do teeter and totter off of that wholeness, don't we? And I love that you bring up the spiritual aspect, because that is something that I'm extraordinarily passionate about. I like to say that if you think that we're not spiritual beings, then it's like saying that we don't have skin, right?
Yep.
It's just part of us. We're energetic beings. And so tapping into that place is essential. And when we talk about leadership, do you feel that each leader has to really go through trials and errors, or let's say dark nights of the soul, or what have you? What does it take to truly get to a leadership status?
Well, I think it's not a matter of like, do we need to? It's a matter of when they're going to happen. Anybody, like, we are all going to face adversity in our lives, whether we're in leadership, like positions of leadership or not. I have a saying that it's just like, and this is in the book as well, like we're in three states of being as humans. We are either going into a storm, we are into a storm, we're in a storm, or we're coming out of a storm, we're preparing for the next one. Those are the three phases of life in which we live. And it's how we handle those three phases that help us prepare for the next. So if we're preparing well for that next storm, while we're in the next storm, we're going to be better equipped. We're going to be better. We're going to be wiser. We're going to be stronger. And then when we come out of the storm, we're better. We're better to take a breath, and we can celebrate wins, and we can prepare better for the next storm. So it's just, we are in those phases all the time. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And as you go through those storms, leaders develop. I mean, just like the buffalo analogy, I nerd out on the buffalo analogy all the time, not just for the through the storm concept, but the buffalo has amazingly thick skin. And it has this thick skin to go through storms. So as leaders, the storms that we go through help us to develop that really thick skin to be able to continue to thrive in storms. And the more storms we go through, and the better we prepare, and the better we learn from previous storms, the better equipped we are, and the better leaders we become.
There's a few things that come to my mind when you talk about this. First off, I learned early on in law enforcement some of these concepts of, especially when you talk about needing to rehearse, needing to train, the saying of, you don't rise to the level of your courage, you fall to the level of your training. And that's just that preparation piece that you're talking about, is that the more prepared you are, the thicker skin that you are. And I too love that buffalo analogy. It's the first time that I have heard it. So thank you so much for opening my mind and expanding it in that regard. It makes me think of similar concepts of like the tree's root system, where it's very deep, it's very strong, it's rooted down in there so it can withstand those storms. And you're correct. Life is full of them. They're full of the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs. Nobody gets out without that. And change is indeed the only constant.
Absolutely. And like the change is a storm in and of itself. Like that's a bit that like being like change, life is going to change no matter where you are. Life is going to change. And that comes with storms. And if you're leading people, whether you're leading your family, leading your friends, relationships, if you are in a position where you have influence over others, doing that well is super important, because things are going to change. And that's just the way life works.
AR. Well, tell me, what's one of your own personal stories where you really felt this I like to call it identity crisis oftentimes, because I think that when we go through really major events in life, that's truly what it is, because we felt like there was a sense of ourselves that we thought we had and now is lost, and we don't know how to move or respond. We become very stagnant in that moment. Are there moments in your life where you experienced that?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So one particular story was really, it's the kind of the crux of why I kind of walked through this concept of holistically healthy leadership, is because I was a completely, if I had to rate myself on a scale of that, what I was talking about, that mentally, physically, emotionally healthy leader, I would have been at the bottom of the barrel when this story happened. So, when I got to my first Marine Corps unit in 2007, I met a guy named Jacob, and Jacob had been injured already in Iraq, and he was I looked up to him so much. He was prepared. We were the same rank, but he'd already been through combat. He'd been in combat. He'd been in it. And he was a great leader. He led his people well. He was a great follower, a great listener. So I was like, man, I gotta figure out what makes Jacob tick. So latched onto him before we went to Iraq, and really started to learn from him. When we came back from Iraq, we were getting ready to go to Afghanistan, and so continued to learn from him, continued to kind of walk with him back and forth. We weren't in the same platoon or the same company, but we would bounce ideas off each other. We were close. And then, our people would work together. Our Marines were they were operating back and forth. They were friends. We were friends. It was a great relationship. And then in May, when we'd been in Afghanistan for about a month, Jacob was killed by an IED. He was killed immediately. We'd only been in country for about a month. And I realized at that point that I wanted revenge. That was you killed my friend. I want revenge. I am going to do whatever it takes to find out who, what, when, where, how, and why this all happened. So I, in turn, drove my Marines into the dirt. They didn't eat. They didn't sleep. I was the worst kind of leader that could ever be, because I was focused on an end state. I was focused on a product, an outcome that I wanted to find out who was at. And I was operating out of negative emotion. I was operating out of hurt, out of grief, out of all these things that were just bottled up. And I was trying to lead as a good Marine would and go find the bad guy and all those things. And then finally I got pulled off out of my truck, and they said, and they got benched. I got benched. They're like, you and your Marines are benched. You're out of the fight. And I was mad. I was like, why? Why? We need to figure out what's going on. We haven't found him yet. And he picked my head up, literally, physically, put my chin and he said, look at your Marines. They're hungry. They're tired. They're beaten. And they're going through their own grieving process. They knew Jake. They knew the Marines that were with him. So you're benched. You need to figure out how to come back from this, because you are an absolutely terrible leader right now. And hearing those words after, the guy that I had known to, I respected in a huge way, led so well, it was a dishonor to him, and it was a dishonor to my Marines, and it was a dishonor to me and everything else that was going on. So in that moment, it was very much like this, oh my goodness, what am I doing? It was just like someone smacked me in the back of the head and was like, what are you doing? This is not the way you lead people. This isn't the way you lead people, and you're doing it. So being able to, and after a couple of weeks, after I'm telling my Marines, hey, I'm sorry. I was not myself. Do you forgive me? And what can I do to make it better? Same thing I tell my kids. But having to say that as a leader to my people it was hard. And understanding where I was emotionally, mentally, physically, and where we were as far as the mission was concerned, and spiritually as well. I was just at the bottom of the barrel, and I needed to pick myself. I needed to figure out those pillars. And that's kind of where those pillars came from. I need to figure out, okay, these are all parts of me. How do I ensure that I am healthy enough in each one of these pillars to be able to go do my job well? And in that case, it was leading Marines in combat, which, like I said in the beginning, spectrum of leadership, that is the far end of this. Those are the two far ends of the spectrums of leadership. It's saving life and it's taking life. And I didn't want to be anywhere near that other end of the spectrum.
And, I was going to say, I was thinking in my mind, but I'm sure that snapped you right back into focusing on something else. When you're pulled out of that, there's that humility piece that is really well felt. And I felt that with you. And so it's understandable that when we experience things like that, especially when it comes to, we're talking about life and death scenarios, when you're in situations like that, it literally is, where you have to protect yourself and you have to protect your team. You have to be able to think clearly on all of those levels in order to respond. And when you're so focused on one thing, that narrowed vision, we all know that's not okay. That's the kill zone. And so, Travis, thank you so much for sharing that story with us. We're going to go into our commercial. And when we get back, I'm excited to pick back up. Stay tuned.
Me too.
Are you ready to take control of your ride to wellness? Rev up with Driven Living. Visit www.drivenliving.com and buckle up for a journey. Get exclusive access to our Wellness Driven Life Show guest portal, where you can dive deep into the minds of our esteemed guests. Sign up for our newsletter and get insider scoops on these distinguished personalities. It's like having a backstage pass to their life-changing wisdom. But that's not all. You'll also receive a free hug. You heard me right, a free hug. An enlightening ebook from the Driven Living team. Discover the science-backed benefits of hugging yourself. It's a fill-up for your wellness tank. Because at Driven Living, we believe in fueling your journey to wellness, both physically and psychologically. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.drivenliving.com today. Welcome back, everyone. We're here with the incredible Dr. Travis Hearne, who just shared such an inspiring, moving, and very vulnerable story. And isn't it when we experience such things that we start to realize all of the things that we are not meeting up to that is truly needed? So those are where your 4 buckets came into play. This is where you become passionate about wanting to share this with others because you've had an immensely vulnerable experience yourself. And when we enter into that humility piece, I think that every strong leader has that and has experienced that and continues to do so. It makes me think of Warrior in the Garden. If you've heard of that, that's more of a martial arts expression, but where you have this understanding of this peaceful flow and response, and yet you're able to, do everything that is needed to protect yourself and others around you.
Yeah, and that the way you say that too is just when we talk about leaders and we talk about the different ways they're pushed and they're pulled, it's when there's a concept of you have to be a strong leader, you have to be focused, you have to be driven, you have to be all these things, but at the same time there's this kindness factor that has to come into play when you're leading, because you're leading people. You're not just leading processes and procedures and things. You need to be driven and motivated and all those things and disciplined and that, but it's also like when you can bring strength and kindness into the same leader, and those things are truly balanced out well, that's when you start to we really start to make change, when you start to live holistically. And it's such a good concept where you don't have to choose one or the other. You don't have to choose being a strong leader or a kind leader. You can be a kind, strong leader at the same time.
And what comes into play is not worrying about what others think of you or testing that out, right? I think that when you're fresh and new at things like this, it's easy to feel like you have to meet up to something, like you have to be this or that. And it's an immense amount of pressure on oneself when you feel all of those things. And at the same time, when you experience those pieces of vulnerability, especially when you've experienced and gone through something that's very difficult for everyone involved, I think it just really humbles down everyone involved. And so it brings you to your knees. It brings you to this piece of kindness that you didn't experience before.
Yeah. And some of the best leaders that I've ever worked with, that humility piece is so strong. They're humble leaders. And also their ability to learn from failure is something that it boggles my mind every single time when I come across a leader. I'm like, man, that is a fantastic leader. And then they tell me their failure story. It's just something that it continues to impress me, that these leaders, man, that they embrace failure, they learn from failure, and they're humble about their failure, and they're willing to talk about their failures, and they're willing to learn from their failures. And that to me, we talked earlier about hey, what storms do you need to go through? Do you need to go through trials and tribulations and storms in order to be a leader? I think that if you're not learning from the storms and learning from failures within those storms and continuing to grow, that you're not living up to your full leadership potential. Failure, like I said, when I talk to leaders that are just killing it, they embrace failure. They don't try to fail, but they try new things, knowing very well that they may fail. And that is how they become successful. That's how but they're so humble about their response to, like, hey, you wanted me to tell you about my success? Let me tell you about the worst failure I've had in my entire life and how that led to success. And it's that humility, like you said.
Yeah. And in hindsight, in retrospect, we are able to see the gifts and the beauty that comes out of those. It is stepping into the unknown, stepping into those storms. And I truly love that concept. Do you want to share a little bit more about stepping into the storm and being prepared for that? How do you share that with your audience, or what have you learned from others with that?
Yeah. And it's the concepts kind of rolling together. So the analogy of the buffalo is like, I think you said it, you talked about it earlier. It's like the only herd animal that when a storm rolls over the horizon, it feels it in its bones. It feels it in its thick skin. And when it feels it, it grabs its herd and it takes a bite of whatever it is laying around. It's like, okay, let's get into this. And they go straight through the storm. So what we have to do as human beings and as leaders is take a little lesson from the buffalo. Like, okay, we got to prepare for this. So what do we need to do? Because this is going to be rough. This is going to be challenging. This is going to be different. What do we need to do as leaders? How can I, as a leader, bring my herd through the storm? What do we need? How are we going to experience this? What's the herd thinking? So when we go through these kind of things as leaders, and what I tell people, like, if you're about to go through the storm, you need to make sure your herd is intact. That's number one. Make sure your herd is fully intact and they fully know what is expected of them in order to survive whatever storm is coming. So they know what part they play in that survival, whether it's on the outside of it, looking out for prey, and that's like so everybody knows their role when they go through the storm. And the second one it's kind of a prequel to the storm, you need to be able to set the culture within your team as a leader. What kind of a culture do you have? Do you know what your culture is? How have you set that? How have you created your culture? Were you inviting your team in to help create the culture that you guys are living in right now? What is the mission? What is the vision? I know every single leadership book in the world talks about vision and mission and culture and all these things. And it's repetitive, but it wouldn't be repetitive if it wasn't true. Those things are foundational things that leaders need to establish before heading into any storm. That way they have a foundation to move through the storm with. They know what they're bouncing back off. They know what they know what's on the other side of the storm. And that's another thing to look into is, like, start with the end in mind. Know what is on the other side of the storm, and and then reverse engineer your planning to be able to get to that end state. And you will have bumps and bruises and different trails you take along the way, but you're going to get to that end state. And if you know what that is, you're going to get there, and you can plan about how you're going to get there with your herd intact through the culture you've created, with written down visions and mission. And like, that is a foundation of how leaders are going to get their herds through the storm, and how leaders are going to get through personal storms as well. To understand, like, okay, well, who am I? Identity, and living those holistically healthy leadership principles, and focusing on mental health, emotional health, physical health, the business health, and also spiritual health. That's the fifth one. I love the spiritual health aspect of it too. So understanding, when we go through, as leaders, we go through personal storms. One storm that I went through, and I don't mean to monopolize with story, but I kind of do. My mom passed away in 2020, and I was leading teams. It was hard. And it was another one of those moments where I had to really check in with myself and make sure that my emotion, my grief process, again, was not getting in the way of leading people. And you talked about vulnerability as well. So vulnerability, going back to them and saying, hey guys, my mom died. I'm having a hard time right now. Here's what I need from you. And if you are able to establish that culture and that mission, that vision, and that team dynamic where you are a solid herd going through storms together, sometimes your teammates are going to have to pick up slack for you, even though that you are their leader, you are the one that is in charge making decisions. There are times when you have to let go of control. And that can be pretty difficult for me. That was one thing that I had to learn really well after my mom passed, was like, man, I no matter how hard I think I can charge through the storm by myself, no matter how hard I know that I can get through this thing and lead well and it's not going to affect anything. It's just not true. I had to be able to lean on others. I had to be able to bring other members of my herd around me in order to get through it.
Mm. That's very powerful. And, the concept of surrounding yourself around the 5 people that inspire you, I think that is a really big key for leaders, because you're correct. When there's a natural leader in play, they oftentimes put everything on themselves. And so they take the reins consistently, and you do have to give up that control every now and again, such as yourself, where you don't have it in you, and you need to allow somebody else to take over, or your team to take over. So I feel like that's a very essential piece to really create your team, your pack, your crew, what have you, whatever you want to call it, and be very, very intentional about that, on who you have surrounding you. And when we consider, you have so many great areas that you hit, and success leaves clues. That's why there's a lot of repeat. But there's also, when we've lived this and when we've experienced this and understand that those repeats hold a lot of power, then you do what we do. We continue to preach them and share that with everyone else. But, holding yourself, with the people that surround you is a very big thing. It's a sense of servitude that we're hitting here, and leadership, in sense, is that.
100%. 100%. So there's a whole bunch of different sayings. There's 2 things that I want to hit on that. Like, you are, and this is it's a true statement. I've seen it. That everybody listening has probably heard it. Like, you are the average of the 5 people that you hang out with the most. That's kind of where you fit. So, one, as a leader, surround yourself with people that you want, that make you better. And then 2, your actions are going to be are dictated by your mindset and what you're thinking. So as we start to surround ourselves with people, understand what's going, like what kind of input you're getting, what kind of output you're giving, because those things truly, truly matter. Who you surround yourself with and what your mindset is have a huge, huge impact on the way you live your life and how you live your life and what you do with your life. So it's understanding that leadership cannot be done alone. It's much better to be done in packs and in herds, whether that's a conglomerate of people around you. I have a spiritual board of directors that I use often when I'm veering off track left or right, to be like, oh, you're getting off track here according to spirituality and faith and things like that. Or you have and I have a business board of directors. It's like, hey, you're getting off track when you're going here. So like having those people that can speak the life into you and and help boost you up to the next level is critical to leading in general, much less through like really, really hard times.
Oh, I love that you mentioned that. You have a lot of different people for different areas.
Mm-hmm.
We all have different gifts, and we all are very well. It's like when you go into business, it's very difficult to do it alone, because you can't do all the things. You're not skilled, or you don't need to be or want to be. There's just so many different aspects of business that's why you want the team. That's why you want the professionals and the creators that, are great at what they do. And so the same thing with all of those buckets that you're talking about in life, advisors that can really steer you in the right direction, be honest with you when you're not, and just be there to hold your hand, or to give you a leg up when in need. And so that all said, Travis, what are some of the things that you do on a daily basis to help maintain your overall well-being?
So I will tell you that the walks are critical. Like I tell my team, and like if you're not taking one meeting outside on the pavement, taking breaths in, like just breathing, doing your thing, like the physical aspect of it, like you need to get outside. I don't care if you're a CrossFit guy and you need to go into your, like, I like CrossFit, just gonna throw that out there. I like going into my garage and I'll throw weights around before meetings, or like I'll get outside. I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So it's like beautiful 300 days out of the year. So I make it a point to get outside and to be out there. I wrote a book in 2020 called Hybrid. It's a guide for successfully leading on-site and remote teams. And in there is a bunch of tips on how do you lead remote teams. Like that's when COVID hit, and it was really, people were thrown into this remote leadership life and they had no idea how to do it. So there's a lot of tips in there if you want. That's also on my website. But so physical health, that's what I make sure I do. Two, I'm in counseling. There was a lot of things that I brought back with me from Iraq and Afghanistan that I continue to keep in check. I call it preventative maintenance. So I have a great counselor that I see, that is a great friend. And he's just like, he walks me through a lot of stuff. And he's one of those guys that's on that spiritual board of directors of me, like, can either kick me in the pants and say, hey, you're being dumb right now. Or he can be like, hey man, he can be my biggest champion. So mental and emotional health, emotional health. Like, I love hanging out with my kids. My kids are in the next room, like right now. So it's just hearing them and being able to be like, play soccer with them. And so that emotionally and mental health aspect, that I have to be involved in those. And that takes up a lot of time. So it's about also, when this leads into the next step, is use a calendar. Like, you as a leader, you have to be able to bring tools in to be able to coordinate all those different levels of holistic health. You need to be able to coordinate those and plug in time. Like, you have an hour, like play catch with son there. It's in my calendar for an hour. Workout in gym, that's in my calendar for an hour. Talk with wife, that's in my calendar. So it's about using the tools that you have available to you to be able to live that holistically healthy leadership life, it's important to be able to have those things. So ensuring that I'm checking in every week, every day on where I am on those scales, because it varies every day. My emotional health may be great one day, my physical health may be bad one day. Like, it's just checking in with myself and being very honest, and just checking in with my people around me. Like, hey, how am I coming across right now? How are you experiencing me this week? Because I feel off. Because you're always going to get a different perspective, and you're always going to get feedback that is helpful to put into practice later.
Well, Travis, you've talked a lot about that mental piece. Where are we mentally? That checking in is so key, because our brain fires so fast. I mean, rapidly. All of the thoughts that we have, and the majority of them are negative, or they're constantly trying to revert us back to past scenarios where that's how we're responding. So it is a continuous thing. And I think the sooner that we understand that and know that is how our bodies respond, because that's how our minds react. Those check-ins, military, I think, often uses the rubber band, right? It's literally physical, right. So it's snapping back into a different thought. Travis, you've been an amazing guest on the Wellness Driven Life Show. I want to make sure that everyone knows where to find you. I've had it displayed here on the screen a few times. So for those of you watching, it's been here on the screen. And for those of you listening in, www.drthearne.com. It's easy peasy. And please find it in the description below. He's got some great books, and the one that's coming out is all about that buffalo concept that we talked about. So be sure to check that out. That's coming out in November 9th, correct, Travis?
November 9th, because the Marine Corps birthday is on November 10th, and I had to get it in right before that.
Excellent. Perfect timing. I'm huge on dates, and I love that. So, again, you've been a great guest on the show. What are you most excited about creating right now?
Man, I'm just like, so I'm gonna take it a step back, and I got goosebumps just thinking about that question. Like, this, what our country and what our world is going through right now is going to be a storm. It's going to be a storm. So what we could do in that storm is take ownership of our own leadership. I can influence my people that I can have influence over. So what I'm promoting and what I'm talking about now, and it's a big pivot for our company, for our coaches, for our consultants, and for the book, is helping leaders to take ownership of what they have control over and influencing what they can influence. If we can do those two things, and we can start seeing that, like we talked about, that ripple effect of just change and people's health and happiness and unity versus disunity is going to continue to grow. And I cannot wait to see that happen. We're seeing it happen within large companies. We're seeing it happen in small companies. We're seeing people build their companies based on that concept. And I think we're going to see a really great change. I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for leaders in our country, in the world, and for business. I'm excited to see people take ownership of their stuff and live holistically healthy lives. That I'm excited for the book launch. There's so many different things that we're going to have. We're going to have conferences. We're going to have 2025 is going to be the year of the buffalo. I'm going to call it that. But it's gonna be a lot of fun. There's a lot of different things that we're gonna be doing. So yeah, drthearne.com, THEARNE. I have a weird Irish last name, so that's what it is. So go there. There's going to be lots of events. Follow along on LinkedIn and like just follow along. This is going to be, to me, in my mind, is a revolution in leadership in our country, and it's a positive one, and it's a great one that we can cling on to now.
Travis, you fully embody the essence of the Buffalo when you talk about, yes, this is a storm. Yes, it's going to be, it's going to suck, right? And yet I'm excited for the possibilities. I'm excited for the growth, for the change, for the expansion, for the evolution of what is to come.
Yeah, adversity is always opportunity. No matter how you slice it, it may suck, but it's always an opportunity to get better, to grow, to find something new that you can build.
Absolutely. Well, fabulous guest. Thank you so much. And everyone, be sure to tune in to his show as well. He interviews incredible guests as well. So be sure to check that out if you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much, Travis, for being our guest on the Wellness Driven Life Show.
Yeah, thank you, April. This is a great conversation. I love everything about this. It was I could go on for hours. We could have like 5 different shows and keep going and going and going, but I know you don't have time for that. And I don't have the breath.
There's always room for more. So thank you so much. Maybe we'll see you again. And thank you so much for our audience, because without you, the show wouldn't be possible. So be sure to tune in next time. Goodbye for now. And we will see you next time.
See ya.